The first time I came in contact with critical thinking, I was 16 years old in Iran. It was a year before the Iranian Revolution of 1979. In our house, politics was a topic of the talk. I also read a lot about the history of Iran, the history of suppression in Iran, and also historical books about different revolutions, in French Revolution, Russian Revolution. So, revolution and the fever of revolution got me. I became a revolutionary. During the revolution, the first 1.5 years, there was a temporary freedom in Iran. Just imagine, people who have been living under suppression, dictatorship for years, 30, 35 years, got the space to be free. The boost of energy in the streets of Tehran when I was living was amazing. They were discussing in the streets of Tehran all the books that were forbidden for years. They came to the market. And we, the youth of that time, were buying and reading these books with a lot of thirst. I sometimes thought that I was eating the books. I wasn't just reading them. It was amazing to be part of that kind of atmosphere. Latin American poetry inspired me. And the music of Victor Jara we heard that on the streets. Everybody was reciting them. I think that was the best period of my life. To be part of something so energetic, so beautiful, so much ideals, so many belief in change was amazing. But then, those days that we called Spring of Freedom, some people even refer to it as paradise on earth, changed to hell. When the people people who were part of the revolution started to stand against each other. When the years of suppression came, from that active person, I became a depressive person. You couldn't do anything. Fear and despair replaced hope and believing in ideals. Ideals just died. People were killing each other. People were attacking each other. Many of my friends got arrested. And for me, it was like the turn of paradise to hell. I was like losing life, feeling that there was nothing else to live for. In those years, I was made an other. Being a Marxist, I was a Marxist believer in a revolution that became an Islamic revolution, made me an other. So, at the age of 26, I had to leave Iran because of my political convictions. I came to the Netherlands as an asylum seeker, the end of 80s. During my study here at the university, I met beautiful people, people who were interested in me, in my stories. I became good friends with them. They helped me to go through difficult years of adjustment. And I am very happy to have had that kind of friendships. But also, I felt being an other again. I was seen as this woman coming from an Islamic society. So I must have been unemancipated and suppressed by the men of my family. I was a refugee, so probably pitiful, somebody who needs help and not much to offer to society, a problem, rather than part of the solution. So I was feeling like, okay, this is not new to me. I was othered in Iran. And it still was painful, but it was something different about this time. I couldn't find an enemy that othered me. There was no enemy. The people who did that, it came from the images they had from me. Normal people, normal conversations. They were like me. So they were not no dictators intentionally excluding me. So I was confused. In the years in Iran, being othered, being made an other, having enemies to fight against were crucial for me, but also it was solid. The source of power was solid, was clear. Source of solidarity was clear. Here it was confused. People whom I had just normal conversation othered me. How can it be? So after life passing, and I became successful in this country, did my degree, and became a professor, I forgot about those moments of being othered in the Netherlands. Till I met Sarah and heard her story. Within the research, I invited different stakeholders, refugees who were searching for a job, HR managers in organizations who were working about diversity, policymakers who have been working about the issues of migrants and refugees, and members of NGOs who were working with refugees. I brought them together to discuss about the possibilities to include refugees in the labor market. The first thing we asked of everybody was to share their stories, the moments that in their life they felt the most powerful, the strength. When were those moments? Share it with us. I remember vividly seeing Sarah entering the room, and I thought, who is this person? She came in, but as if she was present and absent at the same time. She looked at me, but it was as if there was this fog in front of her eyes that I couldn't see her, and she couldn't reach me. There was this distance. I was amazed. So when we asked everybody to tell their stories, refugees in the group, they remained silent. They didn't say anything. The first day passed. Second day, the same, silence. At some point, when we asked, why don't you share your stories? Sarah said, I don't know if I have such a story to share. I told everybody, please be patient, and let's just ask her and others to share their stories, repeatedly. And after some patience, the story came. Sarah shared her story. She said, I was in Eritrea, born there, and have been part of armed struggle there, fighting for human rights and women's rights when I was from a young age. I was an activist, and because of that, I lost many things. Because of that, I had to come to the Netherlands as a refugee. So people were shocked, said, okay, you had such a powerful story, what happened? Why did you say that you don't have anything to share? And she said, I was actually amazed by it myself, and realized when I thought about it, that from the moment 10 years ago, when I came to the Netherlands, the only thing I heard was no. Your language is not good enough. Your papers are not good enough. Your cultural competence does not fit our organizations, is not good enough. And I realized that the repetition of no's actually made me to lose my self-confidence. But today I also realized that repetition of those no's made me to forget my story. And now, here, I was able to rediscover it. And when she said that, I literally saw that the light in her eyes came back, as if there was a boost of life went into her body. Rediscovery of her story made her to live again. And that was an amazing, amazing experience. There was this policymaker who was busy with migration issues for years. She shared with the group that she has been in her work mainly focusing on the deficits and the lacks of migrants and refugees. So much that they were fixating on that, wanting to help them, to make them equal, to make their life better. But fixation on lack actually was so much that she almost forgot that these people also have qualities. They have something to offer to this society. So what happened was that through sharing those stories, people became aware of these images that we have from each other, that the images we take for granted, and by doing so, without realizing the best intentions, we make the other the other. And in doing so, maybe in repetition of that, we actually make the other completely passive. But something else also became very clear, that people do that with the best intentions. So the enemy is not a dictator. He's not there anymore. Actually, the power is not in the positions of suppression. Power is in all those images that we have of another. And all those images that become so normalized in our daily life that we don't think about it, we don't question it, we take that for granted. So if we want to think about change, we need to think about how to unsettle these powerful images, chain of images that influences ourselves, but mainly others, contribute to otherings of the people, exclusion in society. Sharing stories, as this story of Sarah shows, is a very powerful instrument to do that. But sharing stories from points of difference, from people who are actually disconnected, becomes even more powerful because it creates mirroring effects. The story of the other becomes a mirror for you to realize that the routines that you are part of and you take for granted, they are your routines, but still very powerful. Sometimes we need routines to function, but sometimes routines blind us. And the mirror is necessary to, again, be aware of those blind spots. But for these shared stories from points of difference to be impactful or connected, there are some conditions necessary. The two conditions in this case that were essential were taking time and space. So by delay, act of delay and patience, we can create space to see and listen to the other. Create space and time to see the other from the position of the other, from the perspective of the other. But that's not enough. You know, when Sarah shared her story, the fact that she shared it with us was because she felt safe. That space needs to be safe. And the safety of the space happens when we temporarily are able to suspend our own judgments, to make the space empty of judgment. Not all the time, temporarily, so that we can hear what the other story is about. We can feel it. And these are the conditions to create spaces for shared stories that can unsettle the taken for granted assumptions we have of ourselves and others, mainly of others. And these are the connections that enrich our lives, but also can bring about change of lives of many people, like Sarah, that are already lost their self-confidence. And this is the core of my talk. What is the changed condition of critical thinking when the power is not the visible power of position of dictators we fight against, but power is in the process of daily interactions when we take our own assumptions for granted and exclude others without realizing that we are doing that. So one may ask, okay, a story like Sarah's, how can such a story change a system? Revolution changed the system. How can we change a system? Structures, macro structures. How can we change that? I would say the only way to go about change and think about change in this time, when the power is in the normalization practices, the only way to go about it is to invest in interpersonal relationships and make them more thoughtful. Those thoughtful relationships create waves of influence, can travel all around the world and inspire others to do the same thing. This example of Sarah, can you imagine how impactful that can be and has been for many people who were part of that space? Most of these people shared the way that they took that story with them to their organizations, to their ministries they were working, to the municipalities they were part of. That story has been repeated by many. And that is the kind of impact and change that stories can bring. And the repetition of these small stories, small-scale stories, can be essential in thinking big. So we do not start with a revolution where the power is so subtle and invisible. We do not start with revolution. We start with investing in each other and giving the relationship and the conversations we have more color and multiplicity. And maybe, if the waves they become go through the waves of influence, then we can have some kind of revolution by just deconstructing the blind spots in our own thoughts. And by doing so, make a change. That could be a kind of change we can imagine when we think of critical thinking in the time that power doesn't work in the old-fashioned way, but through our own taken for granted, normalized practices. Thank you very much for your attention.